so much for the introduction. I'll give you just a quick introduction of just my history. Turns out that today, physically, is my 3-year anniversary at Baker Hughes. So Baker Hughes is an energy transition or energy transformation company. It's a heavy manufacturing company, primarily today for the oil and gas industry, but also branching out into other industries. And so my role here is CISO for Baker Hughes, which allows me to work really in 3 different areas: traditional enterprise IT, but again, because we're a product company, I deal with product security and making sure that those products that we deploy are not vulnerable to attack, because those products are installed in companies like a Shell or BP or Exxon, et cetera. So I need to make sure that we're not a launching pad for a potential attack with that customer. And then I'm also responsible for the actual OT manufacturing shop floor, if you think about it. So these big pieces of equipment that we are bending pipe and, et cetera, that those physical machines are actually secured and that there's no blending between IT and OT of any kind of security related issues, as well as just the wider accountabilities from a CISO perspective around everything from SOX testing, architecture, security architecture, identity access management related activities, and our cyber fusion center, and so much more, to be honest with you. Before joining Baker Hughes, I spent 36 years at Shell Oil Company. So many good years in Houston, working in primarily the upstream business, so exploration and production. I then spent 5 years in Muscat, Oman, at Petroleum Development Oman, which is a joint venture between Royal Dutch Shell and the government of Oman. And I was the CIO in that role. And so working in and out of the desert with the different suppliers, et cetera. And then I spent 7 years in the Netherlands, in The Hague at Royal Dutch Shell headquarters. I did also infrastructure, more of the downstream business, manufacturing, supply, distribution, also from an IT perspective. And that's when I joined security in about 2006, 2007, then moved back to Houston as the CISO for Shell Oil Company in 2010 and retired in 2017. So it's been a fun ride. I've enjoyed it. Had a lot of great experiences. Absolutely.
Yeah, and looks like you just haven't had enough, and you came back from retirement to join Baker Hughes.
Yeah, I failed retirement. I was officially retired for about 3 weeks before I joined full time at Baker Hughes.
Well, that brings me to the question about the roles of evolving. The CISO's role has been evolving, and looking at what you do and you're responsible for, it's a pretty broad swath of items on your plate, right? You're not only responsible for cybersecurity, also for risk and compliance, and then within cybersecurity you have OT and IT. How do you compare and contrast those days when you saw cybersecurity evolving within Shell last 10 years and the last 3 years, right? We are making progress.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I mean, at the quote, the early days from a cybersecurity perspective, our issues were physical issues associated with, the stealing of a laptop of one of our senior executives, et cetera. And the question was, oh, wait a second, did that individual's laptop have, BitLocker, et cetera, on it, et cetera? That was a big deal because it was expensive to put BitLocker on everybody's PC, but obviously since that time, I've been involved in, again, advanced persistent threats, issues with nation states, lots of relationships and with the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, UK government, Netherlands government, obviously being Royal Dutch Shell, et cetera. So lots of different changes in terms of understanding kind of what is the actual threat. So now we talk oftentimes about, hacktivists and cyber criminals and nation states. And so the buildup of the capabilities of nation states, and also just the commingling between physical and as well as cyber together. We've seen incidents, you can think of incidents like even Greenpeace, at times where they would, scale a building and scale a ship, et cetera, at the same time sending 300,000 email notes to, the CEO, et cetera, or DDoS attacks, et cetera. So all those type things have significantly changed, in just terms of the the issues now that we're seeing around ransomware, and on the OT side, where attacks of safety systems, things that we never thought no one would be doing something like that. We're seeing certainly those kind of issues, and obviously it's very difficult because certainly on the OT side, you know, many of those systems have, technology that's been added, subtracted, brought forth, et cetera, not patched, et cetera, because, security was simply not part of that, the mindset, when those things were being installed. And so now having to go back and segment, off, networks and facilities, so that they're more isolated. Lots has changed across the board. So it's been an incredible journey, and just the whole buildup of the capability now of on the good news of the cyber fusion centers, the security operations centers, the technology allow us to better understand, behaviors and sensors of so many different kinds of sensors, helping us better understand what is the health of our environment. So tremendous amount has changed.
Of course, and I can see why you want to do things now in a different way, and this is an opportunity. And that brings us to the next question about transformation journey that embarked as soon as you landed at Baker Hughes, and it was literally building the airplane while flying, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So Baker Hughes, was in 2017. There's a merger between General Electric and Baker Hughes to form a new company with the majority of shareholders owned by General Electric. And it was really the focus on digital transformation. And so just briefly, if you think about digital transformation, so if I'm a manufacturing organization and I'm delivering today physical devices, drill bits and turbines, which is like a jet engine on the ground, how does digital play into this physical world? And the reality is the whole digital transformation has been instrumental for moving, the company forward. And it has been really a rethink of, what is our relationship to customers? How do we physically engage differently with a customer? What's the customer-centric mindset? A huge push in our organization around the cloud environment. So why do we need, our own data centers? How do we leverage the cloud to be much more productive, where we have, high performance computing allowing us to move things up and down? The other issue is analytics. If you think about the world today, the world of sensors, we actually use the term, sensors are like dust, right? The amount of sensors that we physically are wearing or using, et cetera, where now you add those sensors to these physical devices of turbines and compressors and in other facilities to basically understand behavior that you never could understand before. It's such a kind of the edge computing, the capability to truly understand what is happening with these systems and these devices, so that you can better predict maintenance and wear and tear, different environmental conditions. So the ability to collect that data, but then to analyze it. So the whole data analytics drives the ability to do artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of those different elements. And then elements associated with how do you communicate that value to the customer.
Right.
So your engagement model is now, social media. So, people continue to judge companies based on, the beauty of their website, right? So what does that interaction look like?
Yeah.
And so that's been a real interesting element to see. And then one of the other things that certainly is happening in our environment is we've been seeing the growing of what we'll call the citizen developer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the low code, no code ability to now absorb this data, take this data, transform this data, and so you see more and more, people in the business developing software, developing capabilities, leveraging this information, taking data from these massive data lakes to go in and for themselves identify different capabilities, different insights. And so that's been interesting for us, obviously from a cybersecurity perspective, to how do you provide standards and guidelines so that they can do that experiment, do that research, but also do it from a secure perspective. And it's interesting when, you know, more and more of the research that we are seeing is the output of research more and more is actually in the form of software.
Right.
So, it is software that is driving efficiencies, effectiveness, insights. And so it's been a really interesting element, so that certainly we from a security department become, obviously stay as partners. We're no longer, the department of no, but instead we are partnering with them to say, okay, how can we, take this technology, leverage for the organization and move it forward?
No, absolutely. I think you mentioned and personally experienced the collaborative environment this has evolved into, right? Rather than being the factory floor and just the supply, the pipeline and getting this to the customer, it has become more fluid. It has become more responsive to the customer demands. And I think looking at the last year's transformation, moving into more of a full stream organization. I think Baker Hughes was one of the pioneers in this. Being a Texas icon, I've always looked at Baker Hughes as a advanced manufacturing giant for oil and gas. But now you are more a digital company than you were earlier. Just not just, but a manufacturing gold, right? So, how has that changed in the two organizations coming together? You mentioned about the General Electric part, and then there's the legacy Baker part. How what's your guidance for those that are going to go through this journey? I'm sure there are many who would be experiencing this journey from being a more digital, more product oriented, as in physical product oriented, to more digital product oriented. How do you what's your guidance for them?
So it's really interesting. Obviously, Baker and General Electric both had two different cultures, but both recognize the value of digital and the digital transformation really moving forward. And certainly as we're separating and as we have separated from General Electric, digital continues to lead. So if you think, recently, probably a year ago now, we have a new joint venture with C3.ai. So, the ability to kind of leverage their capability for artificial intelligence, et cetera, it really is driving, this push around digital transformation. And it's interesting because at the end of the day, it does still boil down to risk, right? How do what is the risk appetite? Where are you in being able to identify risk in those environments? So certainly at the end of the day, the products that we physically deliver, have to operate in incredibly difficult environments, multiple feet, multiple miles below the sea floor, very high temperatures out in the desert, et cetera, devices that will run for multiple years, before they are serviced, et cetera. So in each of those things, we have to understand risk and how does the risk of the IT components fit into those elements. So it's really been an interesting conversation because obviously, if you think of traditional retail and IoT situations where you want to get out as fast as you can, but what we all know is that many of those technologies are quickly deployed, but security is not deployed with them.
Right.
And so we need to make sure that as we continue to partner and do digital transformation, security is seen as a partner with those product developers, so they understand the benefits of working together. So it's not, again, a retrofit of security, but we do secure by design right up front.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely essential. Security by design, and at the earliest stage to shift it left towards product development, right? So I think that's absolutely an essential element of being secure from the get-go. Another thing that I would want to highlight, knowing and working with you, is you have been a champion for cloud first from the very beginning. That as long as I know you,
Yeah.
and how much of that has been uh, a push to get out, kind of outcome sooner versus weighing it against the risk that comes with it. Did you get any resistance from the traditional business?
So I think I think the business all recognized the opportunity of the cloud, but I think they actually were more conservative than I was,
Mhm.
you know, in terms of my push. Because I do believe if you think of just the, you know, the reputational impact of an Amazon or a Microsoft or a Google, you know, do they want to be compromised? And the answer is obviously no. I mean, that's a critical element for their business, right? So how can we leverage that environment? Right? And so obviously in those kind of environments, that, you know, those organizations have critical responsibilities, but we do also in terms of how we configure our systems. What kind of information, you know, are we able to put into our environments? How secure do we, you know, do we monitor and measure our environments? I am a strong believer in the cloud. I believe, you know, and certainly we have spent a significant amount of time, you know, launching a new Baker Hughes cloud environment. We are quite aggressive in moving applications, you know, actually in the hundreds to the cloud. And by the end of this year, we will go back and look at our highly confidential applications. And with the help of, again, kind of big four auditors coming in the door to go in and look at our environment to say, do they think that we are ready to actually put highly confidential in the cloud? And I believe the answer will be yes. We've had the benefit of really building our cloud environment from scratch
Mhm.
with, again, great partnerships from you know the cloud service providers, really working with them on making sure we understand the latest and greatest capability they have, so we're not duplicating effort, but obviously recognizing what we need to be doing on our side, and creating environments, basically sandbox environments. So if you think about, again, our research and development, you know, we have almost 1,000 software developers in the product companies,
Mhm.
and to give them what we call sandboxes so they can leverage the greatest capabilities and services, try whatever those things out, and then move them along from a sandbox environment to a development environment, to a QA environment, to a production environment, where again that production environment, you know, is fully managed, fully monitored. We have, you know, the ability to automatically detect certain things, automatically correct things, but other incidents may be monitored by our Cyber Fusion Center. So we're very excited for the cloud environment. And again, C3.ai is kind of a classic example of just part of what we're trying to deploy in that environment.
Well, no, that's absolutely exciting. And in terms of being able to do things faster, but also leveraging the security built in the cloud. And as you explained, probably the sharing of this responsibility of where security, the lines of security lie, right, jointly between the two organizations, between the consumer and the cloud service provider. So, you know, you mentioned about the sensors and the data being everywhere. And then we talked about the traditional development model changing for democratizing development for product businesses to start developing on their own, and you enabling them. Then we talked about the cloud and the journey around that, right? And that takes me to the next question around the data security as it relates to data privacy, because you are probably in virtually every country in this world, and not all are made equal in terms of law, legalities, and the privacy requirements. What has your experience been as you've been trying to roll this out globally with
Yeah.
respect to privacy and regulatory requirements?
Yeah, so legal and regulatory, we actually see it, Val, actually in two different ways.
Mhm.
So first is obviously, you know, we want to understand privacy in terms of the things that we're deploying. So things like GDPR, you know, are our applications secure? Are we doing the right things? Obviously, we have relationships, like you said, in different countries. So we work through work councils for things that we're deploying internally. But also the other thing that we're seeing is as we are selling products to third parties, so be it, you know, Aramco's, BP, Shell's, we are receiving questionnaires about our legal and regulatory, you know, capability and what we're doing. So for instance, we're in the process right now of going through an audit for both the Saudi government, looking at our manufacturing locations, as well as Aramco looking at our cybersecurity capabilities. Same is for BP and others. So again, because we are selling products to third parties. They are asking us about our capabilities, what we're doing to protect their data, their customer data, their PII, et cetera, what we are doing, and we have to demonstrate that capability. But then obviously, because we also purchase, and then we have obviously hundreds of suppliers, we're asking them that same question. How do we make sure there's no issues with some of the software that we might be buying or technology we're buying from them? So very much legal and regulatory is actually kind of a separate component of my team because of issues around PII, export compliance, et cetera. So as we go through risk assessments of all of our projects, that's one of the first questions we ask is, tell us about the privacy impact and privacy related elements around the data that you might be having or having to work with.
Well, and I think that that's probably going to be growing, as we see privacy regimes, being established and becoming more mature, and both in terms of the consumer mindset as well as the general, I would say, enforcement mindset. I think these probably will help both your customers as well as your suppliers be on the same page.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
Absolutely.
when you think about Baker Hughes as a business, and your former self being on the customer side, and then you see your suppliers who you spoke about, like hundreds of suppliers, definitely, who are providing services, software, and product, and human capital. Uh, where do you see the cost distribution? And this is something that has been boggling my mind, and I'm sure a lot about the cost that has been, that the cost center that cybersecurity has been seen as is now. What you described in the last 20 minutes is about actually enabling business to do more, right? So where do you see the economic factors and getting, expanding cybersecurity into the business comes into the picture, so that it can actually provide the value that it has the promise to, right?
That's a great question. So one of the things that we've done, again, we have, again, kind of four major product companies, et cetera. So obviously, being a relatively small cybersecurity organization compared to, a 60,000 person organization, what we've done to establish that partnership is created what we call product security leads. So every year we basically look across the organization for kind of the top, 30 or 40 high priority products that are being developed. And so what we do is we look at it, in terms of potential economic, revenue growth, maybe it's new technology, where we're going in terms of the customer, et cetera. And we identify, again, these top 30 or 40 products. And then what we do is we name a product security lead from that business to really participate with us through a secure software development lifecycle. So we basically now shadow those projects through, from basically new product ideas all the way through deployment, so that we create this partnership throughout the life cycle, so that they understand the value of security. We're working with them. They know that we're there to help them through that life cycle, et cetera. But they recognize that security does come at a cost, right? And we try to show them obviously the value that we're bringing, but also what we're doing to protect them later on in terms of potential future vulnerabilities and dealing with customer related issues. So it's been a real solid partnership by creating these product security leads within each of the different businesses. So that's really been very, very helpful for us moving things forward.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely support that idea, seeing that work in other sectors, and those that have actually been able to, kind of democratize the cybersecurity and make it everyone's responsibility. So that's really great. Great to hear that it's working within your organization. That talks about the internal, I think the controls and the mechanisms that you have to come to the security outcomes that you want within the organization. How about the rest of the industry? What's your relationship as it comes to, especially with oil and gas ISAC being a great force bringing together the oil and gas industry together, but also across the sector. what's your public-private partnership posture in this scenario?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the oil and gas ISAC has been really a wonderful organization that we built up over the last few years. Had the privilege of being on one of the founding board members of the oil and gas ISAC, and I'm currently the membership chair. And we have seen, small companies, large companies, partner companies, strategic partners now really grow this relationship. And what we've seen is a significant increase in the trust level.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've done, the way that we've actually seen the greatest growth in the last couple of years is actually by not sharing data anonymously, but instead saying, we, Baker Hughes, have seen these phishing attacks, and this is what we're seeing, and this is what we're seeing as potential impact. What are you seeing? And it is that open and transparent relationship and that trust that, we obviously identified in terms of kind of a red, amber, green, in terms of communication protocol, but by actually sharing who is seeing this, it's allowed others to do the same. And
Mm-hmm.
so we've created a true partnership, of exchanging information. And actually we have a competition that we run on collaboration, on what are we doing to share information, to sharing ideas. And it could also be as simple as what we're doing in terms of awareness training. What are our kind of our cybersecurity moments that some of us are publishing on a monthly basis? We're sharing that information, as well as more and more positive relationships with the government, both DHS and DOE. And so I'm very pleased with that. And finally, the other thing that we have recently done is we've actually changed and expanded our bylaws
Mm-hmm.
to allow us to have a relationship with some foreign oil and gas companies that previously our bylaws prevented. And so we're actually very pleased to have onboarded now some foreign national organizations to actually begin exchanging information. So it's been an incredible partnership over the last few years. So I'm really, really excited to see it continue to grow going
Well,
forward.
that's great. That's great to hear. And I think, we went through the journey at Auto ISAC in the last couple of years. I'm glad to hear the collaboration across the globe. And cybersecurity is the function without boundaries. And we are connected probably more than ever before, and especially after the whole pandemic situation. This takes us to a completely new dimension. So great to hear that. In some cases, if I may share with Auto ISAC and even prior to that, healthcare ISAC and financial ISAC, there were a lot of resistance in getting foreign collaboration built, and we had to go through several regulatory hurdles. I think those have been taken down in the last few years. So absolutely, I'm glad to see that you're able to take advantage of that and also expand the relationships around the globe. Very essential to getting the right information at the right time and building those trusted relationships. Well, in terms of getting to actually making an impact at the sector and industry level, I believe some of the examples that you just talked about within your organization and within the oil and gas ISAC. How do you see the maturity of the oil and gas sector, which has followed very traditional routes up until very recently, to higher standards, and probably some of the sectors, not saying that anybody is secure, but at least healthcare has invested a lot in the last 10 years, finance, at least financial sector, at least 15 years. Where do you see the next investment and the opportunity lies for the oil and gas sector? What do we need to improve as an industry sector?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, we have to still prove within our organizations the value that we bring from a cybersecurity perspective. So you can't rest on your laurels, right? And it's because in cybersecurity is difficult. It's kind of like being in an insurance company, right? You know, you're trying to protect, the individual organization, et cetera. People don't see what's happening kind of behind the scenes, et cetera. So you have to communicate the value that you bring by showing what you've been able to do to protect the organization, et cetera. But in terms of kind of what the sector needs to continue to do is A, work together, all right, so that we continue to refine our capabilities of information sharing, analytics, data analytics, et cetera. Continue to work with the government to make sure they understand what we are doing to protect our organizations so that they don't mandate, well, you must do X, because we're not a financial organization with financial regulatory type thing. Each of our businesses are very different. Our risk appetites are different. Our environments that we're working in are very different. So it's really important for us to be able to demonstrate to our shareholders really what we're doing around cybersecurity. Again, actually, at the end of this month, I go before the audit committee of Baker Hughes to again every quarter to share with them kind of what we're seeing from cybersecurity risks and threats, but obviously what's our response associated with that. So I think all of us from a sector perspective need to continue to share information back to our board so they understand what we're doing, what the investment is that they are willing to spend on us is actually turning over in terms of deliverables, in terms of what we're able to do to actually protect the organization and demonstrate that by sharing our various metrics, et cetera. So it's great that I'm very pleased. That's one thing I'm incredibly privileged is to have that relationship with the audit committee, to be able to have that open dialogue of kind of what we're doing, what we're seeing, and how we are responding to those threats and challenges.
Well, I mean that's very heartening. I think certainly there is a lot of room for improvement in the cybersecurity leadership community to go and make that message more emphatic and being recognized. Working with you, at least I can see that manifestation of the cyber security functions working closely with the products as well as the business in general, and the C-suite and the board are able to get directly engaged, give timely feedback, and able to invest and support the investments going in cybersecurity. So excellent progress on that front, and I just wish that gets expanded to others in the sector and across the sector. As we conclude this program, today's session, I wanted to ask you about your thoughts and a little bit of sharing of your journey in terms of those that want to get into this field. And I think currently with all the unemployment and the economic situations, there are many that are looking for a transition into a more durable kind of skill set and demand, right? Cybersecurity promises to be one of those where if they transfer from something that is adjacent, they can come and work in cybersecurity industry and be successful and have a long career. So what are your thoughts on in closing in terms of encouraging people to join this industry?
There's never been a better time to be in cybersecurity. So if you think about just all this whole, from a COVID perspective, the number of, brick and mortar businesses that suddenly have to go online to actually stay afloat, right? Their goal is survival, right? How do you get out there as quickly as possible to put your storefront up there and put it online? They're doing so quickly and not necessarily from a secure perspective. And so opportunities abound in terms of cybersecurity, not just phishing, malware analysis, but all the whole breadth in terms of access management, privileged access management, issues associated with architecture. So if anybody has an interest in cybersecurity, it's the right place to have an interest in. And I do believe companies recognize that the value. I think you will continue to see more and more job openings for cybersecurity specialists, and anybody that comes from, the network side of the house, the system administration side of the house, the data analytics side of the house, for automation, et cetera. All of those are wonderful doors to walk through and to come into cybersecurity, as well as now the privilege of many schools offering cybersecurity degrees, and let alone classes, but actual degrees. So it's a fantastic time to be in the cybersecurity realm.
Well, thank you for reinforcing that, validating that. I know we have worked together on this, and then we'll continue to do that. Again, Keith, I know you're a very busy man. With a lot of responsibilities. I'm glad you're able to join us. and share your experience, your thoughts, your learnings, and also encourage those that will be taking on your path. Hopefully, we'll have more KeithHerndons, taking on a career long term that have seen. That are probably not seen earlier, but now they can visualize that someone who's been in the industry can come to a executive role with decades on and take on new challenges, and that keeps people motivated to do more things. So thanks a lot. And today, to conclude today's program, I just want to share about the upcoming ones. Next week we have a session with Tom Patterson, who is the Chief Trust Officer of Unisys, has been a great friend of CFF for a long time and supporter, has always been motivating us and the community towards two things primarily. One is the cyber talent, growth of cyber talent, and also growth of cyber trusted communities, and that we'll talk about trusted suppliers, third-party risk, and securing the supply chain, which I believe is a good segue from today's discussion. In the upcoming weeks, we will also have sessions on product security and left shifting, as Keith probably mentioned, on the DevSecOps. That's the third one. We will have a fourth session in July around product security specifically, as we close out this month. And as we go into next month, and coming rightly from our annual planning last week, is our global sessions that are going to come up on Thursdays at 8:30 Central. We are still working on that timeline a little bit, but the first one will include a very strong contingent from India. That is the 6th of August. On 13th of August, we'll do with Singapore. We'll come back around the globe to have an EMEA session, third week of August. And so if you have bookmarked this Tuesday sessions, please feel free to bookmark the Thursday sessions. That will be more global in nature. And I think this will be a great takeaway from this conversation, that cybersecurity is a global challenge. And those organizations that have been successful, those that operate in a global environment, have done so by making those inroads of trust and making the bridges happen. So thank you again for joining us. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you, Keith, for being with us and sharing your pearls of wisdom. So take care. Have a good rest of the day. Stay safe and stay well. Thank you. Bye-bye.